Okay, so first up with the questionnaire being your first method. Starting on, we'll do quantitative and then we'll go to qualitative. So what I want you guys to do is get a palm card or concept card, whatever you're calling it these days, and you're going to do one for each research methodology. So what I want you to do with your first one is write questionnaire on the front, and then what I want you to do below it in brackets is write quantitative plus qualitative, because this one can be both, as we can see. So we'll go through it one research methodology at a time. So your first one should have questionnaire, and then in brackets below it I want you to write quantitative and qualitative. And then on the flip side of that card, I want you to write the definitions of the research methodology there. Now feel free, if you want, when we get to some of the bigger ones, to paraphrase them. I might even help you with that, but for ones that are quite short, you can generally fit it all onto one card. So what a questionnaire is you can have close-ended questions or open-ended questions. Now, if I was to go to Google Forms, I'll show you what one looks like. You've probably done them for all kinds of, let's say look at your jacket one, for example. Actually, we'll look at this one. So this is an example of a questionnaire that one of my previous students started and didn't finish for whatever reason. But essentially when you look at it, you've got, if we go back to our quantitative and qualitative, the first thing is we have close-ended questions on the quantitative side, and then we have open-ended questions on the qualitative side. So on the close-ended sections, you can have a rating scale questions where the findings can be counted and observed as statistics and the data can be quantified. So for example, if I'm asking which generation do you belong to, this one or that one, Gen Y or baby boomers, that's an example of a close-ended question. And what will end up happening is, I'll see if I can do it, is when people answer, I'm just going to pick all these ones just randomly. What you'll find is the response will come up, and what will come up in your responses tab is you will get these little pie graphs. So obviously when people do more and more questions, you're going to have obviously different ones, but this is an example of a close-ended question that can form tabulated and statistical information and data like our quantitative research methods suggest there as well. So to show you all the options and responses, and it'll show you a little pie graph. And then for other ones, it'll show you bar graphs, or some of them might turn into column graphs as well, depending on the type of question you've done. And you can also create a spreadsheet of that information, which is really handy. So then you can tabulate it as well. So there's a lot of really cool tools out there that you can use for those closed-ended questions responses. Now, I don't have any open-ended questions here, but if I were to, I would add a question. I'll show you guys how to do this next term, because you have an assessment using the questionnaire. Let's just write, please explain your reasoning for the above question. So that's an example of an open-ended question. I'm asking them to explain why they selected what jobs females did. And so that is an example there of the qualitative nature of a questionnaire, where you're gathering people's opinions and their subjective experiences or thoughts on something. So that's why a questionnaire is both, because it can collect both types of data, both quantitative up here and qualitative down here. Okay, so that's our first one. So on the back of your card, just remember to write that definition with the bits I've highlighted there. So you might want to do it in two separate dot points. That might be your first dot point. That might be your second dot point on the back of your card. So moving on, that's questionnaire. We'll go to content analysis now. Now we are going to do this method in class towards the end of this term, but they're also quantitative and qualitative. So again, on a new card, write content analysis in brackets. Below it, I want you to write quantitative and qualitative. So for the quantitative side of a content analysis, they're used in quantitative research to detect and count, and the data collected can be quantified. So essentially with the content analysis it's kind of how the word describes. You're analysing a bit of content. So let's say it's a newspaper article. That's the content you're going to analyse. If you were going to analyse it quantitatively, you might count the number of times they've used evocative language, or you might count the number of images that are in there that depict something. Okay, so you're getting numbers and percentages and data there. But what you can also do with content analysis with the qualitative side is that you can interpret what they're trying to say. So let's say for that newspaper article, let's say we've counted the number of certain descriptive words they've used, we've counted the number of images they've used. That's the quantitative part. The qualitative part might be looking at why have they used that picture, or what's the purpose of that catchy newspaper heading that they have, or the types of images they're showing. Are they trying to persuade the reader to think a certain way because of it? And you don't just do this to newspaper. It can be anything. Like it can be images, it can be whatever. I'm just using that example because it fits for both quantitative and qualitative. But that other side of content analysis is analysing it to interpret themes, words and images from either documents like the newspaper, film, art, music, the media. And so after you've analysed it, you then as the researcher will interpret it and then make a qualitative judgment about the meaning of that content. So let's say the newspaper article, I've counted the amount of times or the percentage of provoking language they might have used about something. So I've got some quantitative numbers and data here, and then I've also looked at what images they've used in that newspaper article if they're trying to persuade me to think a certain way, and then I'll make a judgment about the meaning of that content there. So that's where that one can be both qualitative and quantitative. So again, on the back of your card, writing that as one dot point, and then writing that as your other dot point. Now you might want to, if we were to, like, you probably don't need that little bit there. Okay, so you could probably write on the back of the card. Now we'll go through the rest of quantitative and then we'll go through the rest of qualitative. So questionnaires and content analysis are the only two that are both quantitative and qualitative. The rest are either one or the other. So with statistical analysis, essentially this is a pretty straightforward one. It's examining statistics to make generalizations and extrapolate trends. So on one card, you've got, I hope I'm still, sorry, my screen froze there for a second. So writing statistical analysis on one side of the card, in brackets writing quantitative, and then on the back just getting that definition. So an example of statistical analysis would be looking at a bunch of statistics and trying to interpret meaning and generalizations from it. So you might say 50% of people aged 10 to 11 experience such and such, and so what you're going to do is you can make generalizations based on those statistics and extrapolate those trends. So remember, extrapolating it is taking it from one place and putting it in another. So that one's pretty straightforward there. So you could probably just get the whole thing on the back of the card there. With observation, again, so getting a new card, observation on the front, in brackets quantitative, and on the flip side, observation detects and counts where the data collected can be quantified. That detects and counts. I just think for this one, just write, I might paraphrase it, I don't like the syllabus language there that detects and counts and where the data. I don't think there needs to be an and there that detects. Observation detects and counts data. Where the data collected can go. Detects and counts. Sorry, I'll pause it and fix this. Right, so I've kind of reworded it a little bit here. So observation is pretty much where the researcher counts and tallies data. So an example might be if you were to walk in the playground at lunch and you wanted to conduct an observation on the amount of students who don't put their rubbish in the bin, even though it's right next to them, you would be sitting off to the side and you would just be counting the instances of the amount of people that put their rubbish in the bin and maybe tallying the amount of people that walk right past it or just chuck it on the ground, like a bunch of silly billies. So that's pretty much all observation is. So on your one card, observation is quantitative, and then on the flip side, it's where the researcher counts and tallies data. That's pretty much all observation is. So it might be useful in a research project. If you're trying to observe, say, the behaviours of people and you just want to get a number of how many are doing such and such, that's a great way to do it. So that's all the quantitative research methods that we're going to look at in Society and Culture as a course. Most of them are qualitative, so we'll go through them now. So next one is an interview. Now I might add on this is when a researcher interviews someone one on one. Okay. My whole table's gone out. That's alright, I'll fix that later. So essentially what I want you guys to get is just to add that there. So that'll be the card. So again, on the front you have interview, in brackets you need qualitative, and then on the flip side. So an interview, I'm pretty sure you guys all know, are pretty familiar with what an interview is. It's when a researcher interviews someone one-on-one, and it's usually open question and qualitative in nature. So you're asking a lot of the whys and the how type questions. That's all an interview is, pretty straightforward. Now a focus group is pretty much, I call it an interview on steroids. So it's pretty much the exact same, except rather than being one-on-one, you're with a group. You have generally 3 to 8 people, 3 the minimum, 8 is the maximum, and you as the researcher is what they call a moderator. So you're the person leading it. You might think, oh, isn't this just a group interview? Technically, you're probably right, but the syllabus says it's a focus group, so that's what we're going to call it. So pretty much you have a planned discussion that you want to talk about with a group of people. You'll have a lot of key questions to guide the discussion and the conversation. And again, that's very in-depth, open-natured and qualitative research method. So again, focus group on the front of your card, bracket, qualitative. You might even want to write interview on steroids if that helps you remember it, and then on the back getting that data down. Now next one is secondary research. So you might think that parts of this can be quantitative, but the idea of secondary research is that you use it to help form your own opinion on a topic. So let's say, for example, your assignment where you have to look at a contemporary issue that we looked at of Monday this week. When you do secondary research, you're getting information from someone else, but you're making a judgment about whether or not it's useful, and you're using that information to help you make a judgment within your paper. So that's why it's qualitative in nature and not quantitative. Now your secondary research, however, might look at percentages or numbers of something, but usually you're still using that to persuade and add to an argument. Now, and technically when you're looking at those percentages or numbers, that would be a statistical analysis where it would fall. But because you usually take that information, you interpret it and then use it to back up and support your argument with a qualitative statement such as a why or assessing or making a judgment. That's why it's qualitative. So secondary research is just making a subjective judgment, and we've got it here, about what is useful and what is not for the purpose of the research process. Summaries and synthesis are made of the research findings. So that's pretty much what secondary research is, looking at other people's research, interpreting it, and using it to support your own arguments that you're making. The next one here is personal reflection. Now this technically isn't in the year 11 syllabus, but it's in the year 12 one, so I've just added it here anyway for us. But a personal reflection is the use of evaluation of your personal experiences and values to determine or to demonstrate analysis and interpretation of data in the context of the research focus. Now a lot of that is really quite wanky. You might want to paraphrase that if you like, but essentially personal reflection is using your own experiences, your own relevant cultural subjective experiences to help support or to use as evidence in your research. So for example, let's say you're looking at, I'll go back to that mental health study example, and you yourself may experience some kind of mental health condition. You can use that as a tool of research in terms of a personal reflection. It's a relevant cultural experience to what you're doing. Obviously, you still try to remain as objective as possible, or you might have a close family member or something that's experienced it. So your cultural experience is relevant to the study, and you can definitely use that as evidence. And obviously, that would be qualitative in nature. Now, the next one is participant observation. So this is different. It is different from observation. The difference here is that in observation, when you're just sitting there counting, you're quite passive, you're not involved. Participant observation is where you get immersed in the action that's being observed, and that your role isn't obvious to the people. So for example, let's go back to this picking up rubbish data. Let's say you've done an observation and you've noticed that 40% of people, even though they're sitting right next to a bin in the playground, will just chuck their rubbish on the ground in front of them. And you think, what would make someone with a brain do that? You might look at participant observation as an option to study and understand why. So what you would then do is you would infiltrate that social group, become friends with them, understand all their cultural lingo, all their topic of conversation. And the idea is that by you immersing yourself, so that's the participant part of the observation, you would get the qualitative actions of an understanding of why is it that they're not putting their rubbish in the bin. If I put myself as part of their culture, will I be able to understand that better? So basically, you would interpret meaning from being immersed in that situation, and that's the idea of it there. Now, you are allowed to be, and this is an important part down the bottom here, participation observation can be covert or overt. So essentially we're going to look at ethical research in a second, but usually in most research you have to tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it. Whereas with participant observation, if you walked into that social group and said, hey guys, I'm just going to infiltrate your social group and figure out why that you're not putting your rubbish in the bin, even though it's right next to you, that's going to affect the study. Okay, so you are allowed to be covert and not reveal, I guess, your identity or intentions if you're doing participant observation. Another example you might think or do is say you want to understand, say, the sports culture or the fan culture of a certain football team. You might buy a season ticket, buy a jersey, watch the games, try and really get involved in it to understand why it is that people are obsessed with certain sports. So that's what participant observation is. You're putting yourself in the role of the people you're observing to try and understand the how and why of what it is they're doing. Now the last one, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller just so it fits on the page for a second, is the case study. So what the case study is, I'll just make this all 11, is when you combine usually two or more research methods together. So it's qualitative because it's an in-depth study of a cultural group, and it's only considered a methodology when it combines 2 or more research methods. So that's the key part there. So for example, let's say you wanted to do a case study on why students don't put their rubbish in the bin, even though there's one right next to them, and you wanted to combine, you could combine 2 or more. So you might say, for example, you might do an observation as one, you then might interview some of them, you then might do some secondary research to see if anyone else knows anything about it, and then you might do a participant observation. So you've got 4 different research methods there. If someone was to ask you what research methodology have you used, you would say I've used a case study because I've incorporated 2 or more research methodologies in order to gather data. So that's important to know, because in your HSC they might describe someone doing research like I've just done there, and they might ask as multiple choice which research method have they used, and you might get tripped up because they've technically listed research methods they have used, but because it's 2 or more, it's considered a case study. So that's one to keep an eye on. So again, that's your last card. I want you to write case study, bracket qualitative, and then on the flip side, get that definition down there. And that's all the sort of concept cards I want you to do there for our research methods. Okay. Now it's really important that you do all that, because in the Year 12 syllabus we have to revisit this. So if you've already done it now, you don't have to do it later. Okay, and that's more time we can spend on other content in Year 12. So absolutely essential that you get that done, and that you're going to be using all the way up to your HSC. So it's a really good tool to be using, so make sure you do. Now the next one we're going to look at is ethical research. Okay, this little section here. So I've kind of combined all these things together. And again, I think I've moved my little thing down to the bottom, so that shouldn't be affecting you now. So what ethical research is, this is going to be a similar kind of thing that we've done with social and cultural literacy, how you don't necessarily have to have every single thing there, but it's really good to have a bank of it, around 5 sort of palm cards or characteristics that can help you with it. You might even, if you can squeeze on 1 or 2 cards, that might even work well. But essentially, I think ethical research, when I think of it, is just common sense sort of thing. So when you consider the word ethical, think about what's morally right or morally correct. So if you were to do something that's unethical, for example, unethical research might be plagiarizing someone else's work, okay? But again, a lot of it's a lot of common sense stuff. So I'll go through it. I may even let you know which ones I think are probably good to know, because some of these end up being multiple choice questions in your HSC. So the question might be something like, which of the following is not or is considered unethical research? Or I might say, which of the following is considered ethical? And you've got to pick your option. So any prospective research participants must be fully informed about the procedures and any possible risks involved in the research, and they must give their consent. So what I want you guys to do is, we'll see how we go, create a palm card that says ethical research, and then on the back I want you to do little dot points here. Now I only want you to write what I highlight. Okay, so participants must be fully informed about the procedures and any possible risks. So that would be the first dot point I would write. The second dot point I might write is that they must give their consent to participate. So the idea for the consent is you're not just going to walk up to a random person and start interviewing them. You're going to ask them, hey, I'm doing a research topic on why students aren't putting their rubbish in the bin, even though it's right next to them. Can I ask you a couple of questions? They might say, yep, sure. There you go, you've got consent. It can be as simple as that. Consent where you're not physically present. So say something like a questionnaire. At the top of your questionnaire, if I've still got that up here, you might write a bit of information about what it is you're looking at, why you're doing it, and then that's sort of the consent. Like if they don't want to do it, they can just press out of the tab and it's gone, right? So the fact that they read it and do it and then submit it is them giving you consent there. You also need to make sure participants are not put in awkward situations or asked to talk about sensitive topics that make them uncomfortable. So I'd probably put that whole thing in there. So the idea, like, say you're interviewing someone and you notice that they're really uncomfortable about a certain question you've asked, you just move on straight away. Okay, you wouldn't hang about and keep asking them about that. The ethical researcher is open and honest with participants about the topic and scope of the project and the nature of participation or information expected. So I would just have the ethical researcher is open and honest with participants. So the idea is that you're not doing anything covert, which is another one down here. Now, the caveat I want you to put at the back of this, exception equals participant observation. Oop. So I know I've jumped ahead a bit, but it's really relevant to this one. So this would be a second one. So there's nothing covert associated with the research. The only exception being participant observation, where it's kind of important that they don't know what you're doing, because otherwise it'll ruin your research findings. Okay. So that's the only exception. So covert means hidden or sneaky or hidden agenda. If you're not sure what that means, like say, think of James Bond, covert, he's going under enemy lines sort of thing. So covert is where something is hidden, essentially. So say, for example, if you interview someone and you say the research is for this, or the research will be published in I'm just going to use it in my, my thesis, but you end up going on the Channel 7 News and talking about this person's experience of mental health, and that would be considered covert because you haven't told them about it. You're not being open and honest with them. So you might even put those two under the same point if you would like. But I think that is important to have. The protection of participants' rights to confidentiality and privacy is ensured. That's a big one. So participants' rights to confidentiality and privacy is ensured. So in your PIP, you're not allowed to write anyone's names, even your own name. So you would just say a questionnaire respondent said this. You wouldn't say Mr. Brown from Brisbane Water Secondary College revealed that, blah, 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 blah. So you have to make sure everyone's confidentiality and privacy is ensured. And that's the caveat of putting, I think I got rid of it, didn't I? At the bottom of your questionnaire thing, you would say, all responses will remain anonymous, thanks for your time. And that's, again, just ensuring that for the participant. The researcher should also anticipate any negative effects on the research participants, including the researcher themselves, such as personal danger, police intervention, social embarrassment, or harassment. The researcher needs to prevent these. So I would just have that bit, probably. So you need to anticipate any negative effects on the research participants. Now, a lot of this sounds really like intense, like personal danger, police intervention. I don't think anyone's going to have any of those issues, but like if you're doing a super controversial topic, there are certain things you need to be really careful with, but that's just a caveat, little example there. The researcher is mindful of the special needs of any vulnerable groups, such as children. That's a big one. So and it doesn't just include children, such as children's, and I'm going to write disabilities there as well. That you might want to add in. So let's say you want to interview someone about mental health and you know that the person is in a wheelchair. You're not going to ask them to go to the second floor of a building where there's no elevator to interview them, and so they have to go up some stairs, because you're not catering to their special needs, right? They can't get upstairs, they're in a wheelchair, do you know what I mean? And similar with children, so you're not going to ask kids really in-depth question. You might change the language. Elderly might even be another one you could write in there. I won't, because it'll just botch my thing. But you might change how you speak to someone who's older, because you might be aware of their cultural sensitivities. Like even if it is, say you're doing that research on mental health, you'll be really careful about the language that you're using. So you just got to be mindful of special needs of people. Ethical research practices apply to both primary and secondary research. I don't think that's one you need to get down. That's just common sense. So just be ethical at all times. And then plagiarizing other people's work is considered unethical. So it's a breach of copyright, misuse of intellectual property, untruthful representation of your work. You don't need to get all that, that's common sense, but plagiarizing is unethical. Okay, so you wouldn't do that because you're not taking credit for something that's not yours. So that's the ethical research component of the research methods. Again, you may be able to fit all that onto one card, or you might put it across 2 cards, whatever works for you there. But again, it's really handy to have that flip because a lot of these will be in multiple choice, so rote learning and understanding those is really important. The next and last and final part of the research, you guys are doing really well so far, by the way. There is a lot to do here. The syllabus has a 10-step process to doing your research, and this is we're going to follow this to the letter when we do our PIT. And this is the order it goes in. So what I want you to do is have a palm card that says process of research. Now you should be able to fit all of this onto one card. So what I want you to do, and I've kind of drawn a little example here. I know I've done a real bad rip, but I want you can do 1 to 5, or you might have room to do, sorry, I'm trying to do this reverse. You might have room to write more, just so it can fit on one card. So you might even want to paraphrase this. Instead of saying decide on the topic to research, you might just write decide on topic or choose topic. Okay, as long as you get the gist of it, that's fine. So whenever you go to research something, this is the process that it goes in. Now you might think, do I have to actually know the specific order that this goes in? Yes, because if we look at a HSC, boom, here it is, the second question. When undertaking research, at which point should new theories or suggestions be developed? So they're saying, when does it happen? And so if you don't know when it happens in this order, you'll get tripped up. So you do need to understand which order things go in. Now, a lot of it's a common sense flow. So for example, when they're saying here, when should new theories be developed? You're not going to write a new theory when you're writing your final report. That's just a bit silly. You're not going to write a new theory before you've even developed research because you haven't done any research to find it. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of it you could think is common sense, and that's what I mean by a lot of it is. So the first thing you do in the process of research is you pick your topic to research on. Pretty straightforward. The second thing you want to do, now this is really important as well because you guys are going to be using this process when you do your assignment. The second step is to develop a focus question or a hypothesis. So you basically want to come up with a question that you want to answer, right, as a part of your research. What you'll then do is gather background information. So you'll do a bit of research on the issue. You might narrow the topic down a bit and you might go back and change your question. That's fine, but you just gather a bit of background information about it. Once you have done that, you then get to the part that's called design the research. Now, essentially what that is, when you design the research, that's when you're going to say, now that you've got some background information, you know which elements you want to research. So you might get a blank document and you might write a list of sub-questions or sub-focus questions. And that the idea behind that is that those little sub-questions are going to guide you to answer your big question. So for example, let's say if your big question is why is social media causing anxiety? Really broad, really big. When you're designing the research, you're going to be like, okay, what do I need to know before that? I'm going to need to know how mental health stats have changed over time. What was mental health like before social media, so I can compare it. I might then ask a questionnaire so I can see if it's different for men or women, and so on and so forth. So when you design the research, you're pretty much breaking it down so that when you go to do your research methodologies, you have a sort of a guide to go by. The fifth step then is to develop the research methods to be used. So now that you've got an idea of exactly what you need to do, step by step, you might go, I'm doing something on mental health, so I'm probably going to want to focus on qualitative methods. I might do an interview. I'll obviously do a questionnaire because I can get both quantitative and qualitative data. I know my great uncle Milty had experience with it, so I might do a reflection or a personal reflection if I myself have had those mental health issues. You then you might do a content analysis in the media to see how mental health is being represented in certain TV shows and if that's affecting people. So all those sorts of things, you're sort of picking what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. And then your next step is to use those research methods and actually apply them. So that's when you conduct your interviews, your questionnaires, your secondary research, etc. What you'll then do after that is you're going to have a bunch of data. And this is a really important step. So let's say you've got, say like looking at your questionnaire, let's say I shouldn't have closed it. Let's say here you've got all your data. Let's pretend it's really big. You've then got all these written responses from interviews. You've done a lot of secondary research. You've got a bunch of information in a Word doc. What you want to do now is you need to compile and organize that information so it's manageable. So you might look at your questionnaire data and 80% of it might not be useful or relevant to you, and that's fine, that will happen. So you cut that out, and so essentially you're refining all those areas under all the dot points that you've made in your design the research stage. So all those little subsections and dot points that you have made, you are now compiling and organizing all that information. So you should end up with a document that has chunks of research, chunks of quotes, lots of stats under all these focus questions. Then what you do is analyze, synthesize, and interpret the findings. So that's kind of part of organizing it. 7 and 8 are similar in that way, but once you've put all the information there, you're then going to analyze it and say, okay, which bit's useful? I've got to interpret the findings here. How does my questionnaire and interview, how is what they've said match up with secondary research? What does it say about it? And then section 9 is where you write up the conclusions. So pretty much you haven't actually started writing this until step 9. That's what I want to stress here. So there's a lot of people do those 2 steps, do 1 and 2, and then they just go straight to 9. So you need to understand that as part of your research, you need to do a lot of background work, and trust me when I say that that's really going to help you when you do go to do your PIP and indeed your assignment as well. If you're trying to write the report as you go, you're not going to be using your time efficiently because you don't have all this information. You don't have a really big picture or an idea of what you want to look at. Whereas if you've done the research, you've organized it, you've compiled it, you've then analyzed it, you have a really strong idea in your head of where you want it to go. And because you've done all those little sub-dot points as well, you know exactly what to write, where to write it, how and when to write it, and that'll help it flow better. So then once you've done all that, you pretty much write it up. Now, I'm still not saying that that's an easy task in of itself, but it's way better if you've done all that background work before you actually go to write it. And then the last step is obviously you've finished it, you've written it, and then you're just checking it for any typos, edits, making sure your bibliography and footnoting is all done and correct. So they're the 10 steps of research. If you follow them in order, you can't go wrong. So essentially, that's it for the lesson. What I've done here is I've pretty much written a checklist of all the things that you should have done by the end of this lesson. So all the stuff we've just talked about today, all of these things, tick them off once you've done them. So if you've done the definition and the characteristics, so strengths and weaknesses there. And that's the same for so just go through and tick them off once you've done them. And again, once you've done concept cards for all of those, and then your summary task is pretty much to practice it. Test it with yourself, reading it, give it to someone else in the class, and you guys can test for each other. Now, it's good, especially with someone else in the class, because if they're holding it up and you're reading it out and trying to guess it, you're getting that information and feedback back, but the person who's also reading the card is getting reminded of what the actual thing is. So make sure you do that. You can even get your parents to help test you because they don't know anything about it, so that's another good one as well. Obviously, and you can test them too if you want. But the biggest thing here is practice, 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 practice. It's the same with the concept cards. If you guys are regularly reviewing those and going over them, that would be a great idea. But pretty much to understand all of this stuff, the best way to do it is to rote learn it, the old-fashioned way, as they say, because as we've looked at in our practice HSCs, they're in our multiple choice, and multiple choice questions, we just need to know the concepts. We need to know what they are and what they aren't so that we can get the right answer. And it's similar to when we get a short answer response about it, we need to be able to write about it. So that's where we need to understand the characteristics, the strengths and weaknesses so that we can apply it to the question. And I believe, everyone, that that's it for today. Okay, so get amongst it. There was a lot to be done there, and it was quite a big one to unpack. What we're going to end up doing a bit later is we're going to practice all of these methods one at a time, one lesson at a time in the near future, but we're going to break it down and do it over time. So later on I'm going to do a lesson on how to do secondary research, how to do those chunking strategies and developing all those focus questions that I was talking about, because that's going to be really relevant for your assignment. Okay, that's it. Thanks, guys.